Hello, and thank you for joining us for another Change Your Chat. I'm Tracy Itty, your guest host today, stepping in for Grant Venable. I serve on the Be the Change Volunteers Advisory Council as a public health consultant. Just like many of our listeners, I'm always interested in learning more about how BTCV really does all its work, and a big part of that is the staff behind it. Today we have Thato Mabena, Director of Field Operations for BTCV Africa. Thato officially joined BTCV in 2019 after serving on multiple projects as a volunteer. Today, we have the privilege of hearing his story and learning how he supports the work BTCV does in Africa, the whole continent, and globally through BTCV Kids. Thato, welcome to Change Your Chats.
Thanks, Tracy. I'm excited to be here.
So I first met you last year at the 2022 BTCV annual board meeting in Phoenix, Arizona. I hope you enjoyed visiting State 48 of the USA.
Yes, I did. It was a great time there. The community is amazing. The outdoor activities are great. I really liked it there.
Thanks. And at least you came during the not so hot part of the year. But yes, today we wanted to learn more about your changer story. I hear it's very special and very personal. So thank you so much for being willing to share it with us. In addition to that, we wanted to learn about your role as the Director of Field Operations for Africa. For anyone who's not been on a BTCV trip, every volunteer is called a changer. And one thing that they're asked to consider is, what is my changer story? And why am I here? As well as, why is education important to me? So Thato, if you could please take us back to your early education and describe your story up until this point. We'd love to hear it.
Thanks, Tracy. So I am from South Africa in a small township called Alexandra, just on the edge of the city. So townships in South Africa were segregated by race and very poorly constructed. Mm-hmm. I went to a primary school just 8 kilometers away from where our house was, and high school was not too far away either. I later completed my BTech at the Tshwane University of Technology in Pretoria, where I studied commercial photography. And as a kid growing up in the township, it was great because we did not know anything outside of it. But because the area is poorly constructed and it is one of the roughest townships in South Africa, there's crime there and there's violence, but it is also a safe place for people to live and want to be safe. So growing up in tough living conditions, I learned that I needed to get an education to better the life, the living conditions of my parents, and mostly the living conditions of my children later in life. And now I'm a freelance photographer and a director for field operation for Africa for the organization Be the Change Volunteers.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. So you have served on multiple BTCV projects so far. Where all have you been?
I have served twice in Malawi, twice in Tanzania, Puerto Rico, Uganda, Rwanda, and Peru, and I'm ready to serve everywhere else in the world.
That's so awesome. I'd love to hear that. Those are all really different places.
Yes. Yeah, Africa, mostly Africa and Peru. Peru was very, very recent, and it was a long travel for me from South Africa to Peru, but I really enjoyed it there.
That's awesome. That's so neat. On a side note, how many languages do you speak?
I speak about 6 South African languages. There's about 11 in total.
Wow, that's amazing. Maybe you can add Spanish to that, right? And maybe some Hindi later on if you go to India.
One day.
One day at a time. That's so awesome. So my next question for you is, I know you have 2 main roles with BTCV. First, working with our director, Grant Venable, working on all the projects in Africa, and then the other is with the BTCV Kids. Can you tell me more about that? I'm not familiar with that.
BTCV Kids is a scholarship program that was initiated by our co-founders, Jimmy and Christy Cook, in 2007, in order to make sure that recipient students would have the ability to complete their education without fear of financial shortfalls. I am also the recipient of this amazing scholarship program. Anyone can become a sponsor. It's $750 annually to join the pool of donors that support the program, which scholarship students from kindergarten all the way to university can benefit from. It is not like one of those individual pick a kid and sponsor program. it's a pool effort. I manage the day-to-day operation and communication of the program globally and provide support to the co-founders for transparency and correctness to our investors.
That's so neat, the connection that you were a recipient of that scholarship and how you're working with all those kids that are getting those scholarships. That's really cool. So, what would you say is most challenging about your work managing the BTCV kids?
I think the most challenging thing about managing BTCV kids is the communication aspect and planning. They want things to be done instantly and overnight. And on our side, it just takes a lot of time to one, schedule funds to be sent to them and other supplies.
Mm-hmm. Totally. That makes a lot of sense. It's hard working globally across different timelines and just cultural preferences. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
What would you say is most rewarding about managing the kids program?
I would say seeing students complete their education and going on to graduate with hope that they will get a better job and better the living conditions of their families and mostly living conditions of their community.
That's awesome. That's exactly like BTCV's main objective, right?
Yes, that's the
Education
main.
means better jobs. That's the main goal.
That's our main goal.
So great. So, when you are not working on BTCV Kids, you're working on projects specifically in Africa. As part of that, I'm told you do site evaluations. Can you share with us a little bit about that process, such as what is the purpose of a site evaluation? What do you do to complete one?
So the I guess the main aspect of a site evaluation is for us to assess the needs on the ground, the needs of the community. So a BTCV site evaluation includes 2 to 3 BTCV representatives traveling in person to the project site for at least 2 days. We meet with the community where BTCV representative shares about about BTCV with a greater community so that it is clear why we are visiting. At the school, we conduct interviews with local leaders, school administration, parents, teachers, students, and everyone that has a stake in the success of the school. These interviews are typically done one-on-one with some participants, and then others are done in groups. Evaluators meet with like the engineers on the ground to understand the range of available construction material and other supplies. We review the transport options that are there. We visit at least 3 options for accommodation to determine the proximity of the project, the range of services, security if needed. And then we gather all this information and then we bring it back to our board. With all this information, we present it to the board of directors who then vote or get to vote on the project if it's worth going to, if it's worth doing or not.
Wow. Everything you said sounds so important. BTCV is so blessed to have you doing this job. It sounds like they keep you pretty busy.
It does keep me busy and I love it.
That's so great. I love to hear that. I imagine that there are some things that you didn't realize about this type of work before you started. Is there anything that sort of stands out to you?
So what really stands out to me is that I have learned that there's a great need for education out there. You know, something that we at times take for granted because we have access to. You know, growing up, there were schools around me. There was no real yearning of education. Then you get to leave your comfort zone and you go to places far away from home in the most remote areas. And you get there and you find that the community, the parents, the children are asking for what we take for granted, and that's education. You know, growing up, it's like I had a choice whether I wanted to go to school or not, and they don't. All they want is to have an education, and that for me kind of like changed the perspective.
That was really powerful, Tato. Thank you for sharing that. I think That's why BTCV is here, right? It's
Yes,
just for those children that just they yearn for an education, and it's just not as easy um, unless you have sort of like the work that BTCV is doing. So
the,
great, so awesome.
the lost and forgotten.
Yeah, but that's just it's so sad, but like what be the change that you wish to be to see in the world, just to every little bit we can do, we
That's
should
true.
do. It's so great. So a BTCV team leader at the board meeting this past weekend pointed out that your African culture positions you to understand things in Africa that we in the West simply can't and won't ever really understand. How do you use your story, your life experiences to relate to the children and the teachers and the communities? And how do you apply that to your work?
So I'd say I kind of like relate to what I see in the African countries, the demographics, the living condition, and just life in general is kind of like similar to my upbringing. Maybe not as rife and evident, but I can relate to the situations. There is an African proverb that says "Motu kimutu kabatu," which simply means "I am because you are." And it is just like a social contract of earning respect by first giving it. It keeps me grounded, it keeps me humble, and it reminds me why I do what I do.
That is incredible. You earn respect by giving respect. Is that it?
That's true.
That's, so that is awesome. I love that and so powerful.
You have to say it in Tswana, Tracy.
Yes, I know you're gonna have to teach me that. I'm gonna need that typed out so I can say it. I would love to learn that. I was looking for things like that. It's such a great way to connect just like your heart to your work, right?
That's true.
BTCV sends teams of 10 to 20 volunteers on service projects at global school partners. You're a team leader, managing the needs and organizing the service work for 20 people for a week. Sounds to me like a huge task. Can you tell me just a few of the things that you do to prepare for a team?
Yes, it is. It is a big task. There's a lot that happens behind the scenes to keep the boat afloat. But most of the work is done prior to the arrival of the team, and that includes booking of transport, booking accommodation, and getting the best accommodation and getting food, work supplies, getting water supply for the week for every changer that's on the trip. So yes, that's the kind of work that happens behind the scenes, and it is a big task for me.
On that note, what would you say is the most challenging about leading teams? Would you say it's sort of people or logistics or both? I don't know.
I think what's most challenging, I kind of say both, but what stands out for me is just like trying to keep everyone satisfied and healthy throughout the week, and reminding volunteers of our mission and how we do things, because some volunteers come with a certain expectation, a certain way of wanting to do things, and every now and then we have to kind of like remind them that this is away from home, there are cultural differences, and this is how things are done when we are with the group of volunteers in this organization.
For sure. I think that is a huge thing whenever you go to a new place to just come with a teachable heart, just sort of being open to what the community needs and not sort of our own needs and expectations. I think that's hard, especially for Americans, I would say, who are always very used to being everything very individualized and how running a certain way, but sort of just it's so neat to have our eyes open to just like how other people what eat and talk and like just even relate to each other. It's so valuable.
Correct.
Do you have a thought about what's most rewarding to you about leading teams?
I think when we reach the end of the week and I kind of like look at everyone in the team and everyone is happy and smiling, satisfied about the kind of work that they did throughout the week, just to change the lives of those less fortunate. To see that at the end of the week, to me, it's fulfilling. It's very rewarding.
Makes it all worth it, right?
Yes, true. It kind of like stands out and kind of like gives one a purpose. So once you get to the end of the week, you leave a completely different person.
I think that's so true. Okay, this question might be a bit tough, but what is one of your favorite stories from the BTCV trip that you would like to share, maybe with somebody who's thinking about a trip and just sort of to encourage them to participate?
Yes, that's a difficult one. It's very hard
Sorry, I
to
know.
point out just one story from all the bills that one has been through. But I'd say it's just like after a trip, you feel a sense of you feel completely different, right?
Mhm.
At least for me, it gives me a purpose to serve. I don't know. I didn't know I had this in me, but we all do. A little flower in our heart that needs to be watered every now and then. And these trips for me are just like a fountain of water that fills my soul. I kind of look at it as the Lord's work. We are just servants that aim to provide education to every child in every corner of the world.
That is awesome, Tato. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it takes just a lot of faith and courage to do what you do. And I love to hear that and how you're just applying all of your experiences and everything that you've been through, but also doing it for your faith and just doing it for all of the community around you and for so many people. And I know you have a daughter at home. I'm sure you're doing it in part just to show her just like what good can be done in the world, and just I'm sure she's so proud of you.
I'm sure she is. One day she kind of like paving out or making way for for a better world so that she too can get a better education without any struggles and having a difficult kind of like a difficult life. So I hope one day she'll grow up and she'll do the same, not only for herself but for everyone around her.
That's so incredible, Tato. I'm sure she will. I have no doubt about that. Tato, I just hope you realize how many people are helped in so many ways because of you. Just through our conversation right now, it's just so evident to me how much you care about the children, their families, the community, how you've applied your faith and your commitment just to this role. I can really feel your heart and what you do. I feel blessed to have gotten to hear your story. And I know BTCV is blessed to have you as part of the organization. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about all of the change that you do. And I just want to thank you so much for joining us today on our Change Your Chat.
It's my pleasure, Tracy, and thank you for all the work you do for this organization. Be the change.
If you like Change Your Chats and you want to hear more of them, check out www.btcv.us. Thank you and be the change.